is the lesson review for simplifying rational expressions. So the gist of that lesson, I feel like, was just that there's more than one right way to get the same answer. So as long as you're correctly using your the properties of exponents, you're going to be good to go. So I'm just going to do a couple of examples just to help you out if you have any more questions. Okay, so if I was presented with this problem, again, there's more than one right way to do it. I would probably deal with the fact that this is a negative exponent first. I don't like to have a bunch of negatives in there that I have to figure out later. So if this whole thing has a negative exponent, remember to turn it into a positive, you just have to put a 1 on top. And now instead of this being a -2, now it's a +2. We're not done because we have to get rid of the parentheses. And remember, when you have 3 things that are being multiplied, all squared, you can just distribute the squared to all 3 parts there. Remember that 4 is its own thing. So we're going to have 1 over 4 squared times x squared squared times y to the 5th power squared. When you have an exponent on an exponent, like over here, you just multiply your exponents. Here you can just evaluate. So 4 squared is 16. X squared squared, multiply to get x to the 4th. And y to the 5th squared, you multiply to get 10. So our final answer there is 1 over 16 x to the 4th, y to the 10th power. Another one. Here, I would probably start with dealing with the fact that I have a negative exponent. Remember, when you have a negative exponent, it's already in a fraction. If it's in the bottom, you just move it to the top. And if it were in the top, you would just move it to the bottom. So on the numerator now, I would have y to the 10th power, y squared. So if I combine those, that just becomes y to the 12th. There are 2 separate bases, so you add the exponents. From there, I would probably simplify the number part of our expression. So this part here, this fraction, -7/21. The top and the bottom there are both divisible by 7. So -7/21 becomes, let's do it over here, -1/3, -1/3. This first step, I'll go ahead and write the 1 in there so you can see it, but you don't need the 1 in the numerator. Okay, so last, we are not done because remember, you're not done until there's only 1 of each variable. And right now I have 2 x's. I have 1 in the top and 1 in the bottom. So when you divide, I kind of showed this in the last lesson, you can go ahead and just subtract the smaller exponent from the bigger exponent. Okay, so the exponent on this x is a 1. So what number is smaller, 1 or 5? Well, 1 is smaller. So we can cancel out the 1 as long as we take it away from the 5. So in the numerator, we're going to end up with -y to the 12th over 3x to the 4th power. Now, a lot of times, some misconceptions I've seen is anytime somebody sees a negative symbol, they think that something needs to happen. When you have negative numbers like this -7 or -1, don't try to move those to the denominator or vice versa if you need to, or if that's what is going on. It's only when you have a negative exponent. If I just gave you the number -4, you would never rewrite that as 1/4. It's -4. The difference is if you have like x to the -4th power, then you need to put a 1 on top and make it 1 over x to the 4th. So numbers can be negative, exponents cannot. I will do one more. Do the monstrous giant one that she did in the video because I would have approached it a hair differently than she did. Oh, psych. So it's 2a to the -3rd power b squared to the power of -1 over -a squared b cubed c to the -2nd power squared. The whole thing squared. Okay, so she kind of started off by distributing the squared to everything, I believe. I probably wouldn't do that. I would probably work with the inside first and then square it at the very end. So what I would do, I would probably distribute this -1 to all three of those and the squareds to all of those. So I'm taking this exponent and distributing it to all three parts. Don't forget to send it to the number. Then denominator, distribute the squared to all of those. So remember this negative here in the front, it's really like -1 times a squared, like that. So I'm going to write it separately so that I can go ahead and square the negative as well. And I'm just going to ignore this giant squared here for a minute. Actually, I'll go ahead and put it on so we don't get confused. Okay, so now I'm going to simplify all of these. So I'm not worrying about negative, I'm just multiplying. When you have an exponent on an exponent, you multiply them. So a to the -3rd power times -1 is +3. 2 times -1 is -2. That's a -1 if you can't see. In the denominator, -1 squared is +1, so that kind of cancels out there. I'll go ahead and write 1 though for the time being. Exponent on an exponent means multiply. Exponent on an exponent means multiply. Exponent on an exponent means multiply. Okay, so now I'm going to worry about all my values that have negative exponents. So the 2 has a negative exponent, it's going down. The B has a negative exponent, it's going down. C has a negative exponent, but it gets to go up. Okay, so in the numerator now, these guys are gone because they're moving down. We have a cubed and the c that came up, c to the 4th power, over a 2 came down, so 2 times 1, and then a to the 4th stays put, b to the 6th stayed put, but we have to include this b squared that's going to move down. Okay, so now I'm going to simplify the letters that are on the inside because you can only have one of each letter. And right now we have an A on top and bottom and 2 B's in the denominator. So since the A's are on top and bottom, I'm going to take the smaller number, 3, away from the 4. So now in the numerator, all we have is c to the 4th power over 2 times 1 is 2. Do that subtraction there, so that's a to the 1st power, or just a. And then we're going to combine these b's. So when you take b to the 6th times b squared, there's 2 separate bases, so you add them, and that becomes b to the 8th power, and this whole thing is still being squared. So I'm going to distribute the squared to every single thing inside the parentheses. So I'm going to distribute to the c, the b, the a, and the 2. So c to the 4th squared over 2 squared, a squared, b to the 8th squared. Exponent on an exponent, you multiply. 2 squared is 4, a squared, b to the 8th power squared. Exponent on an exponent, we multiply. So c to the 8th power over 4a squared, b to the 16th power.